as it did a competition. And Devontae Smith right in the center of it. I gave you those numbers. He's the 7th player in this era, BCS and college football playoff, to win the Heisman and a national championship in the same season. So we've talked a lot about him, and he obviously was spectacular. Let's talk about his quarterback, Dan Orlovsky. Yeah. Mac Jones, he's projected to be a mid to late first-round pick. Show us what we saw last night and what it means.
Yeah, he's on this meteoric rise this season, Greeny. And I think the two things that stood out last night were operational mechanics and then the ability to throw the football wherever he wants. And I wanted to show this angle of the play. This is going to be Jalen Waddle on this shallow cross. And I wanted everyone to see this angle, but then we're going to go to the reverse angle because that's the stuff that I love that Mac Jones showed last night, because we know he's not like this special playmaker athlete that we see with some of the young quarterbacks in the NFL, but can you have operational mechanics when they're needed? Now, everyone put your eye on this linebacker. This is going to be Pete Werner, and at the snap, he's going to drop back to the middle of the field, okay? This defense is known as one plug. He's a plug player. He's going to have vision on receivers that are running shallow crosses, but also vision on the quarterback to see if he does break the pocket. So, vision on that guy. Now, I love this about Mac Jones. When he gets to the top of the drop, okay, and he gets a little bit of pressure off this edge, don't hang back there. Don't wait. You've got a little bit of a seam. Climb the pocket. So I love that from Mac Jones. Now, when you climb, and I told you that linebacker was going to drop there, understand what the defense is and what's trying to happen. When you climb, keep your vision downfield. Look, he's got his vision downfield, and everyone's going to go, well, why don't you just run to this open area? Because this guy is going to beat you to that spot. Know who you are. Know who you are. The operational mechanics to get the ball off. Now, here comes Waddle from the left side. And he realizes, like, okay, I know that Waddle is going to beat him to that spot. I've climbed the pocket. Let me give him that easy completion for a big third down conversion. So I love that. But this is one of my favorite plays. Okay, this is Devontae Smith. He's at number 3, and he's going to be running this crossing seam, okay? This is going to attack a cover 3 defense where this defender, a third. Now, why they have the linebacker covering him, that's a different conversation, everybody, okay? We'll get to that at a different point. But I love the subtlety that Mac Jones plays with and understanding what the coverage is. This is a great look, okay? This safety is the guy. You've got to move him because the weakness is trying to get this ball to this area. You know that Devontae Smith is going to beat this linebacker. Trust that he's good enough. You've got to move the safety. Well, how? Watch what Mac Jones does. He's going to climb, step, turn with his eyes and his shoulder to get that safety to move and deliver that football. Look, that safety's gone now. Now, look how great of a throw this is. Like, guys, this is not wide open. You got to get this ball over that linebacker, but before that safety collapses again, an absolute perfect throw by Mac Jones. The subtlety that he played with, I think, is going to put him into the first round.
Absolutely. And you know what? One of the most underrated attributes of great players is intelligence.
Yeah.
Kid graduated with a 4.0 GPA in 2.5 years and has a master's degree now. He's smart, and smart matters a lot. Dan, that's outstanding. Stay close by. Meanwhile, I want to talk a little more about the bigger meaning of what they accomplished last night, and specifically for the coach, Nick Saban, who last night surpasses Bear Bryant by winning his record 7th national championship as a head coach. And after the win, Saban was asked about passing the Bear.
Not really. I'm just happy that we won tonight. And I really haven't thought about that because you're always looking forward. And I just love this team so much and what they've been able to do. I can't even put it into words.
Come on, man. Of course he is. I mean, how can he not be? I mean, he does it the right way. He recruits well, but more importantly, develops great players. He's the greatest to ever do it, and he'll be the greatest for the long time.
At some point, it becomes a statement of fact rather than an opinion that Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach of all time. And just look at the years on that screen. I mean, he's been doing this for 14 years at Alabama, and what he has accomplished. And Bear Bryant, albeit an entirely different era, basically put up almost exactly the same accomplishments in a quarter of a century. So Saban's place has just been remarkable. And let's bring in two people who understand the perspective on this as well as anyone. The great Reese Davis, who's the host of all of our college football coverage. Reese, thank you for getting up. And of course, Paul Feinbaum. And Paul, I want to start with you because you covered Bear Bryant at the beginning of your career and the end of his. So how would you put into perspective this accomplishment for Saban last night relative to the legend that he will always be compared to?
It removes any doubt, Greeny. Paul Bryant was one of the most legendary figures in all of sports history. But he did it over, he won 6 titles over a 25-year period. He also won it in a subjective world where you depended on wire service polls. And there was one year when Alabama won a national championship in 1973. One of the polls gave Alabama the national championship after the regular season. They played Notre Dame in a 1-2 matchup, and Alabama lost, but he still claimed one. So it's so different. Saban's winning it in the playoff era, where one mistake in the semifinals and you're gone, as he found out in 2014. So I think it's an interesting debate, but I spoke to Paul Bryant's grandson, Mark Tyson, not long ago. His son is the number 3 quarterback on the Alabama team, Paul Tyson. I asked him, I said, your grandfather is considered the greatest of all time. He said, Nick Saban is the greatest football coach of all time. And that's coming from the grandson of the man who used to be the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah, and so, Reese, how has he done it? You look at it and you say this is an era where it should be more difficult to do it, not less, because of the playoff element, because television has meant that so many programs, as opposed to once upon a time, get the opportunity to get exposure and all the rest of that. It should be harder to dominate the sport now. How has he done it?
He's done it, Greeny, because it's always about the players. And I realize how cliched that sounds, but if you look at the way the guys reacted to him during this pandemic, how they played for him, how they stuck together, it's certainly not just this team, but it's something that's been overlooked about him because of his intense nature on the sidelines in past years when you would see eruptions at an assistant coach or a rear-end chewing of an A.J. McCarron back in the day or whatever it might be. It gets lost, the relationship that he develops with those players. When I was walking out of the tunnel last night after the trophy ceremony, Jalen Hurts was in the stands. And, he came back to see that team, even though he finished his career at Oklahoma. So I think it's because of the relationships he develops, the consistency with which he operates, and the fact that they always feel like that he has their best interest at heart. And because of that, he's able to recruit the best players. And the thing that gets overlooked, he doesn't just roll out great players. He and his staff develop them, and they get better. And that was what was special about this team, particularly even the stars, guys like Najee Harris, and you guys have talked about Mac Jones and certainly Devontae Smith.
Now, Reese, I want to ask you a question about the season in general now. You, of course, traveled the country, as you do every year, doing College Game Day, but it was entirely different than it would normally be. You don't have the throngs of thousands of people around. And it was just a season unlike any other. And I wonder if you could put into perspective, I mean, I was sitting here every single morning over the summer wondering if we would get any games. The fact that we got all the way to the finish line and that we had this legitimate playoff and everything else, how would you put into words what this season was?
I think it was great for people to have. It was not the perfect season by any stretch of the imagination, and there was a lot of angst with players waking up virtually every morning wondering, is today the day that I'm not going to pass the test? And perhaps some of them had far more serious issues in their lives that they had to deal with. But to be able to have this respite and to be able to have something that is so important to so many people in the DNA and in the fabric of what's important to them, to have it exist in full for the most part, and to be able to have a playoff with big brand name teams and have a generational type team, a team that is in the argument, in the discussion, certainly for the greatest team of all time, at least in terms of accomplishment, I think is something that's memorable despite all of the hurdles that had to be faced.
And Reese, you saying that just made me realize I should ask you that question, Paul, about the greatest of all time. I opened the show asking that question to Joey Galloway. You were around this group and sort of live in it so much. Was this the best of Saban's championship teams?
Easily. Just the offense alone answers the prize. I mean, he's had better defenses. That goes without saying. He's had some of the greatest defenses in college football history, but this offense is unparalleled. And just, what we saw in the first half last night with Devontae Smith. But to follow up with what Reese said a minute ago, Greeny, I think what's going to make this more special for Nick Saban and for college football is the struggle to get here. Countless times, as you said, we talked about whether we'd ever get to the first game, let alone the last game. And even a lot of people who thought we'd get to the first game never dreamed we'd get to Monday night. So this is one of the most remarkable stories I have ever seen in the history of college football.
Agreed. Reese Davis is going to be interviewing Nick Saban a little later this morning, so we'll look forward to that. And Paul will be with you a little later. Thank you guys both for getting up with us early this morning. We have much more on this game.